Hello, it is a pleasure to present at the Architecture, Media, Politics, Society, AMPS 2026 conference. My name is Patricia Semmler and I teach at New York City College of Technology. I am presenting today along with Professor Konzelman from New York City College of Technology and Professor Leung from New York Institute of Technology. This presentation begins with a simple premise. Cities are not only physical artifacts, but accumulation of cultural, spatial, and ecological memories. And those layers shape how cities adapt to change. Every city carries the weight of what it has been as a living archive that shapes how we move, gather, and imagine who we might become. The land and the built environment does not forget. What changes is what remains legible through our interventions.
Imagining the future is a form of memory. We tend to think of memory as backward-looking and imagination as forward-facing. But when we imagine a future for a place, we draw on spatial experiences we have already had. The street that felt right, the threshold that slowed us down, the plaza where we played or relaxed. Imagination recombines and transforms what memory gives it. Which means that erasure does not free a city to become anything. It impoverishes the material from which the future can be imagined. What you see here is Lower Manhattan, layers of urban memory in the built environment. 17th century Dutch settlement streets, the 1811 grid, Broadway following an ancient Lenape trail, and streets tracing buried rivers. The city wrote over these layers, consciously or not. They remain legible, shaping how New York moves, feels, and reacts. Cities like ancient manuscripts accumulate layers. Today we argue for making this layering process conscious and deliberate.
Memory, in this context, is the accumulative intelligence of a place, the social practice, spatial pattern, material wear, smell, sound, and the ecological relationship that community cultivate over time or that are inherent to the site. It actively shapes how the community function and how people related to the place. It is not a nostalgia or museumifying neighborhood or retreating to a romanticized past. The spice market in Istanbul has been operating continuously on this site since 1664. Its worked arches, sensory intensity, and social rhythms shape everyday use, carrying meaning and accumulative memory over time. When this memory system are erased or ignored, city lost their ability to remain legible to who inherit them.
A palimpsest from the ancient Greek meaning scraped again is a manuscript that was scraped and written over repeatedly. Traces of the earlier text always remained. Urban environments are palimpsests written on the land, continuously rewritten over time. In this sense, the city can be read as a story, and the land itself becomes the manuscript. Every street, threshold, building carries traces of what came before. The question is whether we read these traces and design with them or ignore them. Layering is not preservation. Preservation freezes. Layering is an active interpretation of what is and what was. It asks, what do we carry forward? What do we transform? And what do we consciously relinquish? There is another way, one grounded in continuity, fundamentally different from nostalgic conservation or complete erasure.
To understand how the palimpsest operates in practice, let us turn to two cities, New York and Istanbul. New York's original Penn Station was demolished between 1963 and 1966. When it was gone, the architect Ada Louise Huxtable wrote, quote, "We will probably be judged not by the monuments we build, but by those we have destroyed." This rupture revealed the loss not only of a building, but of a shared urban memory and experience, and catalyzed the modern preservation movement in New York. That is the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. What you see on the right is the Penn Station design concept published in 2016 by Pau Architects. The project draws on the idea of the palimpsest, describing it as an architecture of memory that amplifies historical layers without replicating them.
What you see here is a neighborhood full of daily life, for example, laundromat, local traffic, corner shops, and pedestrian. The aqueduct of Wales in Istanbul, built in the 4th century by Roman, is still shaping how the street moved around it. Across culture, we found different ways to describe what we might call the intelligence of place, the qualities of location that architecture must read before it writes. The Roman called it genius loci. In Turkish, the closest translation is ruhun, ruhu, the spirit of place. It refers to how a place shaped over time through its history, climate, material accumulation, and pattern of use over time. What this concept shares is recognition that place carry intelligence embedded in material, spatial pattern, and living experience. They are legible to those who know how to read it. The spirit of place live in monument and ordinary environment. The challenge lies elsewhere. The systems shaping the city are not designed to recognize or register this kind of place-based knowledge. When urban design reads and responds to the spirit of place, it supports continuity and belongings. When it doesn't, it produces spacelessness associated with disorientation and loss of identity in the contemporary urban life.
The dominant narrative of urban development worldwide operates through a similar logic: optimize and modernize through replacement. This logic is produced through interlocking systems that shape how cities change. Financial systems prioritize future potential over existing social relationships. Regulatory frameworks treat sites as abstract economic units. Political processes reward visible transformation, to name a few, while what is lost often remains unaccounted for. Together, these systems do not simply produce development. They determine what kind of memory are recognized. The outcomes are not uniform. In some cases, memory is erased, the continuity is broken, and in other cases, memory is reconstructed. New interventions adopt the language of the past, producing an appearance of continuity while masking underlying rupture. A recent example, discussed in preservation debates, is the redevelopment of the White House East Wing, illustrating this second condition. The new addition presents itself as continuous with the existing fabric, not through layering, but through a controlled reconstruction of historical form. This revealed a more complex relationship between memory and power. Power does not operate outside memory. It produces one of its layers, selecting what is visible, legible, and remembered. These processes reshape the social fabric. Erasure produces placelessness, while stage continuity produces more controlled and selective identities. In both cases, the ability of communities to recognize themselves in space, maintain continuity, and sustain a sense of belonging is fundamentally affected.
Urban rupture requires only indifference to what is lost. When spatial memory is erased, whether by war, urban renewal, or unilateral redevelopment, cities lose more than aesthetics. They lose social continuity for their communities, the landmarks that anchor daily life. the informal care networks that operate through known spaces, the spatial language that tells communities who they are and where they belong. These losses are not abstract. They disproportionately affect the communities with the least political power to resist, those whose neighborhoods face the highest redevelopment pressure precisely because their memory is not legible to power and does not register within the systems of value that shape urban decisions. Examples are Istanbul's Sulu Kule neighborhood redevelopment, New York's San Juan Hill, cleared for Lincoln Center, and the highways that cut through the Bronx under Robert Moses. Different cities, different eras, and the same underlying logic. Cities have the capacity to layer rather than erase. The question is whether we choose to, and what frameworks make that choice possible.
The Istanbul Hagia Sophia has been a Byzantine basilica, then an Ottoman mosque, a secular museum, and turned back into an active mosque again today. Each transformation added a new layer. The Byzantine mosque coexists with Ottoman calligraphy. The Roman columns support the Ottoman arch. The spatial logic of Justinian's 6th century basilica is still legible. The building has continuously adopted, layering each era with its own meaning, while acknowledging what came before. This element of memory remains active through ongoing use, for example through the call to prayer. Istanbul more broadly demonstrates this condition. The Hippodrome, the Byzantine walls, and the long-standing urban pattern continue to structure contemporary life across the centuries. The urbanism take memory into account is not theoretical. This has been a long-standing historical precedent.
Everything we have said about memory so far has been framed around human communities. Cities are not only human habitats. Cities carry ecological and biological memory in their watersheds, soil health, tree canopies, green corridors, and species movement. When that memory is erased and streams are buried, canopies removed, and corridors fragmented, cities lose their capacity to absorb the local impacts of climate change. Flooding, urban heat, biodiversity collapse are not only environmental problems, they are consequences of ignoring ecological memory embedded in the site shaped by local climatic conditions. What you see here is the Ayamama stream in Bukukuyu, Istanbul, a waterway that had been buried under urban development, now restored as an ecological corridor and a public space. Ecological memory allows urban ecosystems to absorb stress and recover.
In Korea, the city of Seoul, the Cheongyi-Chien stream was buried under an elevated highway in the 1970s. In 2005, the highway was demolished and the stream was restored. The results of this daylighting were measurable. Urban temperature dropped, flood resilience improved, local species returned, and the stream became a widely used public space in the city. What makes Cheongyi-Chien relevant to this argument is that the project recovered multiple layers of memory, hydrological, cultural, and ecological, while improving the daily life of its inhabitants and strengthening the city's resilience to climate impact. Importantly, it transformed the site into something new by revealing and reactivating what was already there.
We propose a framework for memory-informed urbanism without nostalgia, structured through 4 design principles that address different dimensions of the built environment: spatial patterns, social practices, ecological system, and legibility. This design principle are the primary generator in this conceptual design shown here. First, layering rather than erase. Treat the existing spatial memory as a resource, work with the existing form. Second, engage existing social practices, understand how space is being used and how social relationship and everyday life are being embedded within them. Third, extend memory to include ecological system. A resilient urban futures require us to include non-human system in our design thinking. Observing how the soil, water, vegetation, species, and climate already operate on the site. Fourth, maintain legibility. Identify and work with the local spatial language so that change remain readable and meaningful. This principle translates memory into a practical design framework.
What these principles reveal is that how we treat memory shapes how cities function. Cities carry multiple layers of memory, social, spatial, and ecological, that are continuously filtered through systems such as zoning, finance, policy, and design culture. These systems tend to privilege what can be measured and monetized, while what they cannot register is often ignored or erased. The result is not neutral. It produces either continuity through layering or rupture through erasure. What this reveals is that how we treat memory shapes how cities function across some key dimensions. First, climate resilience. Cities that retain ecological memory, green corridors, watersheds, tree canopies, are more resilient to environmental stress. Second, social and ecological equity. The erasure of local spatial practices disproportionately affects marginalized communities, human and non-human alike, who face the greatest pressures and have the least power to resist. When memory is erased, the networks and spatial anchors that sustain them are weakened or lost. Third, cultural identity. In a globalized urban landscape, where similar forms are replicated across cities, the erosion of local architectural language produces environments that become increasingly illegible to their own inhabitants. In this sense, the memory-informed urbanism is not theoretical. It is a practical response to the conditions outlined.
We began this talk by saying that imagining the future is a form of memory. We want to end with the other side of that claim, that how we treat memory determines what kind of future we can imagine. We are at a moment when the built environment faces compounding pressures, ecological, technological, economic, and social, and the dominant framework is systematically designed to erase the past as if it carried no value or meaning. The temptation is to simplify, to clear, and to start again. We want to argue for the opposite instinct. The most relevant response to the current urban complexity is not erasure, but careful reading of what exists in order to allow for a critical mass of consensus. Cities are continuously made by everyone who has inhabited them, humans and non-humans alike. Our task as designers, academics, and policymakers is to feel, observe, and listen carefully to make that argument more livable and resilient for all. We want to leave you with one question for your own practice. What layers of memory, cultural, spatial, ecological, does your next project build on, and how will you make that layer legible? Thank you.